Hi, Nia.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I can't hear you. Give me a second.
Hey, Jen. Oh, you're muted if you're saying something.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, Jen. Ashir, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hey, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm just gonna take it without the headphones. I'm not sure why.
Okay.
Okay. How's it going?
Good.
Good. How's it going, Jen?
Oh, it's good.
Good.
How was your time in Vermont?
It was so nice. It was perfect weather. There was a heat wave here, so it was really nice to be able to escape.
Yeah, I think you got exceptional weather. It was
Yeah,
really nice. It was like summer came just for you.
how's it now?
More like spring. It's
Okay.
It's been gloomy and wet.
cloudy
I think, yeah, next week's supposed to be better.
Okay.
but that was beautiful a couple weeks ago.
Um, yeah, it looks like we have a lot of members of the public here today, so thanks everyone for joining. We're gonna give everyone a few more minutes to get in and then we'll get started.
Ashir, on the agenda, I know Srini proposed that topic about support for assigned sections, and we were going to talk about that he is, if you saw his email, not coming today, so you'll just have to like, preface that with what he asked. Okay, yeah, you're on top of it.
Okay. Yeah.
Got it.
Hi everyone. We'll just give a few more moments as everyone else gets in, but good to see you.
I think we're pretty close, so I think we should probably just go ahead and start. So we'll call this meeting to order. Nice to see everybody. I'll take you through the agenda as always. So start by reviewing the minutes, updates from the PUC and the tag. Then we wanted to try sort of our first deep dive into the report structure. We'll kind of see how that goes. I can see, the group expressed interest in low income households as its top priority, which makes sense, but I think we'll have to see how well we do with such a big topic, and take that into account for further progress on our final report during these meetings. And then Srini is not here, but he asked that we consider adding a regular item on the agenda about checking in on our individual segments that we're working on. So we'll leave some space for that as well. We'll take some public comments. We'll have a check-in from the credit issues subgroup, and then we'll tackle a request on public education tools that the PUC expressed interest in. More public comment, and then we'll wrap up. So as always, a packed agenda, but we'll see how we do. So first, has everyone had a chance to review the meeting minutes from May 28th? Seeing some nods. Okay. Were there any edits needed or any questions about the agenda from last time? Okay, hearing none, I will ask for unanimous consent to approve the May 28th, 2024 meeting minutes. Can everyone raise your digital hand? Okay, I am seeing unanimous consent, so we'll consider those approved. And I didn't mention it, but as always, it is really helpful if the EAG members stay on camera, if at all possible, and non-EAG members and members of the public keep your cameras off, except when you're speaking. And just a reminder to use the chat for EAG use only for administrative issues and not for substantive comments. Okay, great, thanks. Now I will turn it over to Dominic for our update from the PUC. Thanks. Or Jeff, did you have a hand up or just residual? Okay, great, thanks. I'll turn it over to Dominic.
Thanks, Mia. Two updates from the PUC. First, S305 is now law. This happened about a week and a half ago. We haven't met since then. The governor signed S305, which was the PUC's housekeeping bill. It did include some CHS-related items. So that is what was been talked about most was the changing of the first appointment deadline for the first TDA, which would have been 10 days ago, but is now required to have the first budget approved for at least one DDA by September, pardon me, September 1st of 2025. There is also a change. The annual registration date had been January 31st with the PUC ability to change to now change to set by statute to June 30 of every year. There was another change about what was required, what fuel dealer information was required to be posted on the PUC website. There were legal briefs filed late last year, early this year, about confidential business information. And so the law was changed to reflect you're only posting the necessary materials on our website. It helps keep business information confidential. And then they're fairly bureaucratic thing, but there is more direction directing the Commissioner of Taxes to share tax return information with the PUC and DPS to support basically data verification on the back end of the CHS program. So that's now law. Biggest thing for us is the change in the DDA date. Moving forward, the change in the registration deadline will be important. The rest is pretty behind the scenes. Any questions on that? Alrighty, hearing none. The second thing I wanted to bring up was the public engagement session that was held last Thursday. I don't think we'll be talking about it anywhere else on the agenda. So for those who were not able to attend, this was a pretty robust conversation. We had more members of the public than we had in the previous two sessions. Conversation was flowing. There was some controversy, which I think does make for a good public meeting. There were discussions about the environmental implications of propane, the split incentive created between landlords and renters, and associated, fuel costs and thermal upgrade costs. Conversation about the urgency of climate change, as well as the efficacy of the PUC approach as a whole. We do not have the recording for that yet, but Curtis said that they would be able to produce it within a week of the meeting. So we're expecting it by the end of this week. As soon as it's available, we'll put it up on our website under the consultant section where the rest of those recordings are. And yeah, that is the update from the public engagement. The third session was completed, which was the last that was currently publicly scheduled. We are under contract for 3 more meetings. We are internally but taking into account how the first 3 meetings went, and we'll be, making any necessary changes in approach for the remaining 3 meetings. The current state of thinking is at least one, likely 2 of those will be held until after the full draft rule is published, so that people have a complete item to react to. And that means we've got 1 public engagement meeting contracted that's not currently obligated, and we will be announcing what we want to do with that as soon as we made a decision. Jeff?
Yeah, hi. 2 things. One is, do you want us to attend those? And secondly, I did attend the first one. There was only 2 people from the public, and was a bit disappointed to be incorrectly claimed as having a hot mic incident on a news outlet, which we've, since the commissioner here has asked to recant, but that was kind of a sad bit of news reporting. But just curious, just wanted to let you all know I did not have a hot mic incident. And is it something we should be calling into or not?
You are more than welcome to. The aim is to talk to people who do not have another line into this process. But for your own purposes or for the purposes of supporting work in the EAG, it might be useful. You are welcome, but not obligated, I guess, is the short answer.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions
Any
for
other-
Nick? Okay.
Right. And then, as per usual, just to note, we do have comments open on pacing. The EAG as a whole has not responded, but everybody is encouraged to respond in their individual or professional capacity. Information for that's on the website.
Mike?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that comments are, they're asking for comments by June 19th. So that deadline's coming up.
Thanks for adding that. Okay, if there are no other comments, we'll turn that over to Emily and Matt for an update from the tag. Thanks.
Thanks, Mia. Most of the last tag meetings discussion revolved around a presentation. So we had a modeling and GREET workshop where 2 staff from ERG, who is the contracted entity working with the Agency of Natural Resources, they gave a Vermont energy sector life cycle analysis of upstream greenhouse gas emissions presentation to the whole tag. So we discussed configuring GREET to reflect Vermont specific conditions. And that took up a lot of discussion as well. I think there was general agreement around using a GREET and having Vermont specific conditions in the GREET model in the Clean Heat Standard life cycle analysis, and whether or not to use GREET. And then we also touched on avoided methane accounting as another thread in that discussion. And then in that presentation is available in the tag materials on the PUC website. And then TJ Poor from the department gave a continued emissions profile of the grid update. And in that update, the department has directed NV5 to look at the Vermont portfolio for long run emissions and does not know how that translates to life cycle emissions. And then we just touched base on NV5 and opinion dynamics, so the potential study and the Clean Heat Standard TRM work connecting between those two deadlines and making sure they were talking, which they are. I think that's about all I have for an update. Are there questions, or Matt, did you want to add anything?
No, that was pretty comprehensive, but it just occurred to me that maybe EAG doesn't know. We meet Thursday mornings, and our next meeting is this Thursday, the 13th at 9:30 a.m. So if anyone from EAG is interested in seeing what happens at the tag, that's when we're the next meeting.
Thanks, Matt. Any questions for Matt and Emily about the tag meeting? Alrighty.
Okay, sounds good. So now we'll get to the topic I discussed, which is, making space for this deep dive into low-income households. For this one, we've planned it to be fairly unstructured, although, I'll turn it over to Ashira to facilitate, but we'll kind of see. Like, I think there's been an enthusiasm for this group to have sort of wide-ranging discussions about the issues. This is the opportunity for that. I think we can reflect on how this works and then how we can, sort of translate this into our final work product. So this is a good opportunity to bring up any issues that you've been thinking about specific to low-income households for our final report. So Ashira, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Mia. And to set expectations for this, just as Mia said, it's a little bit more of a free flow discussion than we've had in the past. I'm sending back over our demographics collection worksheet, so that's where we'll be working in. We have about an hour to really dive deep into this. And so Dominic has graciously volunteered to keep the notes for us, but you can also, when you're in the document, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that it is recorded. Oop, that's the wrong screen. Here we go. That's sorry, I just
Sure, I'm sorry. I just do not recall. Am I taking the notes in this document or in a separate document for?
you can take it
later
in
purpose?
this document. Okay, you should be seeing the right screen now. And I'll go ahead now that it's being shared and allow access. And again, if members of the public could refrain from signing in to this, that would be helpful. And I also wanted to go ahead, I sent around the note, the brainstorming that Jeff took as well. And I just wanted to refrain from putting it into this document without being in the meeting, but I'll go ahead and add it as well. Okay, so now we should be good. So I'll just open, if you all have had, maybe I'll open with Jeff since he did the writing. Maybe Jeff, you want to tell us a little bit about what you wrote and what you're thinking as it relates to low income households, and then we can kind of go from there.
Sure. Yeah. Just want to put on this that this is my experience in weatherization, and it's 25 or 6 years, the first 9 being out in homes every day doing energy audits or inspections for what was then Capstone or CVCAC. It is now Capstone. In the last 14 or 15, whatever the math is, here at the state office, where I am more administrative, but I do get out into homes as much as I can, and obviously here directly and communicate with our 6 low-income weatherization providers. So based on my experience, our clients that have applied for weatherization, they struggle to even pay for the structural repairs that they need, that often could prohibit them from getting weatherization, because our program doesn't have a lot of funds to fix roofs. We do in recent years, but those are limited. They're going to run out in a year or two. So most of our program life, we've had to defer homes because of a leaky roof or a caved in foundation. And we've tried to connect, and we still do, try to connect clients with existing low income or low interest or no interest loan or grant products like USDA or the home ownership networks. And it's a really low percentage of times that works because various reasons, clients have no ability to have any more payments a month, have low credit. There's various reasons. So our experience is we need to pay for everything through our weatherization process. And thankfully we have the funds to do that. Just clients, if we didn't do it totally free, we wouldn't be able to weatherize many homes. So just wanted to, I know you all maybe don't have any experience with low income weatherization, and I don't know what your experience is with low income folks, but that's ours, and we serve 1,000 to 1,400 a year and gaining. So I just wanted to, put it out there, the challenges we see, and 1 in 10 homes has vermiculite insulation in the attic, which I bet may be a smaller percentage for non-low income homes, but it's still significant, 5 to 10% of the homes. And by law, you can't go up there and just insulate or air seal or blow on top of it with insulation. You've got to abate it. There is no recognized testing procedure. So that's a added $5,000 to $20,000 abatement cost before you can weatherize an attic, which is always the first place you want to start when you weatherize a home. So there's just a lot of obstacles for weatherization, low and moderate income, a lot of costs that I just want to make sure everybody realizes. Obviously, the potential harms are, any increased cost for a low and a moderate income person is very harmful. I mean, we all know the affordability of Vermont is high and getting higher, and low income folks live a different world. They're worried about getting a car to get them to work, not an electric vehicle. So there's a lot of potential harms. I think one benefit could be if this created a funding source for our program to serve more people, especially if it's outside of our existing. That could be definitely a benefit, but I also worry that we're not going to be able to serve enough people quick enough to avoid the harm that the increased fuel costs are going to cause them. And I guess with our housing stock, I'll be short here, I'm almost done. Very few of our homes, there is a plug and play heat pump solution to get them off of carbon based fuels, oil, propane, kerosene. They just don't exist. And as they do, they're going to be very expensive. We'd like to get, a lot of our folks are in mobile homes and use kerosene, which is very expensive. If we could, they do make heat pump hybrid units that could potentially sit on that ductwork, which could be a good solution, but they're very, very expensive, and we haven't cracked that nut yet. So anyway, kind of rambling, but I think I touched on everything I wanted to say.
Go ahead, Jen.
Thank you, Jeff, for bringing those points up. So I've been a financial coach at CVOEO for 2 years, and I would reiterate exactly what you said, Jeff. The idea that some of the smaller repairs that have to happen for some kind of energy transition to take place, it's very hard to find money for that. It can be even a very small amount, something like fixing a chimney liner or something other structural. There's just not funds out there for that. And also the idea that having to pay for the complete repair or weatherization. That many low income families can't take on more debt loan or even qualify for a loan because of credit, or don't want to take on any more payments for their budget. So that's exactly what I've seen. Also wanted to add two other thoughts I had, which were, I think when we talk about low income, there's a lot of intersection with the other demographic groups. So I think in the report, it'll be very important to note that the economic situation is something that's a barrier, but there can be other reasons in addition to the economics that make certain groups have a difficulty entering the clean energy transition. So kind of being mindful of where those intersections are so that both any barrier is addressed and not just the economic one. The other thing that I think is important with low income is how that merges with other programs for low income. So something like LIHEAP or our own weatherization, where weatherization through the Community Action Agency weatherization can be used. That's great. There could be some people where either because they've already had weatherization or there's some reasons they can't get into the program. That's where it's going to be really important to offer some other options other than the weatherization program. And then also just moderate income where they also have some economic restraints and making sure that there's programs that are available for them as well.
Thanks, Jen. And Dominic, I just wanted to check in. Are we taking notes? Are you taking notes in the document or somewhere else?
I've got a separate document. I'm sorry. Is that what you said earlier?
Yeah, I was asking to take them in this document directly so that we can show them if that's okay.
Yes, I'm only recording what people are saying, so it would not be, is there a spot at like the bottom of this document that I could put it in, or do you want me to put it in this below Jeff's stuff?
I would put it right here below
Okay.
the recommendations and Jeff's. So we can just create a dividing line and then.
Yeah, I think
Let
just
me
putting it under discussion notes and then we can figure out what to do with it later on to integrate it into other parts. Thanks.
If I could I just give one quick example? A number of years ago, 5, 6, well, probably more now, we didn't have funds to address vermiculite and home repairs like we have recently with ARPA funds. And we were deferring 1 in 10 homes because of vermiculite. And we worked with the Department of Public Service and Ed Delhagen. He helped us and the Vermont State Employees Credit Union. We created a 0% interest loan for our weatherization clients to abate vermiculite. And we had 1 or 2 clients follow through and able to do it. And we had the need for hundreds to do it, and we only could get 2. So that's a pretty good example of they're not able to take any loans out, even 0% interest.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yep.
And thank you, Dominic. And yeah, Mia, go ahead.
Thanks, Wendan. Yeah, Jeff, I think it would be really helpful if you could provide just recent data on who WAP has helped. I know there's stuff you file, so I'm not suggesting you reinvent the wheel, but stuff about what income levels and just kind of the most readily packaged information on the number of people assisted, the types of homes they're living in, income levels, kind of whatever OEO kind of usually publishes about that. I think it would be helpful if you could collect some of that information for this group just to have a baseline for our report. I think that would be helpful.
We've got a yearly weatherization legislative report that I think would provide all of that. I don't know if you want me to email it to the group or just you and Ashira or whatever. I think that would do it.
If you could email to Ashira, I think that would be great, and we could include that in the future. And I think that's definitely like a good starting point for however this final report is done. And then I also was curious about the I hear what you're saying, Jeff, about the fact that it is like really hard to sort of transition a home fully off of fossil fuels. And you know, there are huge technical challenges for some of that. I wondered if you have any sense or can follow up with future data about how much WAP is able to electrify homes and stop them using fossil fuels. You know, recognizing that that will be a long-term benefit as fuel costs rise. So could you just talk about your work in that area
Sure.
and how you've gone with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
So we've had ARPA funds. I think, are
Mhm.
you all familiar with that? Whatever it is, Rescue Plan Act.
Mhm.
We've had it for 2 years. We've got another 2 years of funding. And that is what has enabled us to set aside some home repair funds, some vermiculite remediation funds, some funds to install pellet and wood EPA certified efficient stoves, and heat pump water heaters and cold climate heat pumps in weatherization clients' homes during the process of weatherization. So we've been doing some cold climate heat pumps, and we're not replacing any existing heating sources. We are trying to offset usage of that during the periods, spring, fall, warmer winter days, when that technology is cheaper to heat with and can adequately heat the home. So that's what we're doing. I can get you numbers of how many we've installed per number of homes we've weatherized in that period, if that's helpful. But those funding will end in 2 years. We may have some IRA funds to pick that back up, but that's still under, we're still working on that. But if nothing else happens in 2 years, we won't be able to do that with our core regular weatherization funds any longer.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jeff.
that's helpful.
Anything else, Mia?
No, just if Jeff, like kind of whatever data you have, I'd certainly be interested in seeing it. I know that's a lot of work to get anything new, but anything ready-made, but on the electrification side, I'm personally interested. Thanks.
That's all right. We're always being asked for data like
I'm
that.
sure.
I think
I
I've
know
got some.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
So thanks. So we'll go to Matt and then Ben.
Yeah, I just want to highlight that point because I think many people have that baseline comment, like this is a switching technology. And in new construction, it certainly is. And I know at CHT and others have built new homes that are entirely electrified with insulation and whatnot. But we're talking about retrofits, particularly low-income homes. We're not switching anything. And I think you need to realize what Jeff just said. He spent his life in this career. I run the heating and cooling contractors, and we work with the technicians that install all these devices. This is not a switching technology in most cases, not all, but in most cases, particularly with older, moderate to low-income housing. This is going to reduce fossil fuel consumption. It does not eliminate it. So even if you are using half the amount, 40% less, 60% less, you are still using fossil fuel at an increased cost. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Ben?
Just wanted to ask Jeff, so to what extent, and this is, maybe you won't be able to answer it, but just a thought, like the weatherization, you know, the funding, let's say the funding cliff was to happen in 2 years, the primary sources that you have remaining would be what, DOE and HWAP funds for the weatherization?
Yeah,
your
we'd probably
core.
have one more year of bill funds, which is the bipartisan infrastructure law through DOE.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious, like, you know, if that was to happen, like, what would be the ability for the weatherization program to, like, essentially change the rules and, you know, update, you know, for example, you know, rules on like replacing like a standard efficiency furnace with a in-kind furnace and etc.
Sure. So our program was started in the 70s with DOE, the late 70s, when they created the national DOE weatherization program. There's a program in every state still. We get an allocation from DOE every year based on a formula. We get about 1.7 million a year. Vermont in 1992 thankfully created the state funded weatherization program. that has traditionally been 85% of our total funds, 85% state, 15% DOE. In recent years, that percentage has changed dramatically, with ARPA funds being federal, the bill funds being federal, and our state weatherization, what used to be called the trust fund, is not producing the funds that it once did because of, you know, people using less fuel every year. So, so the DOE rules, the DOE funds follow DOE rules, which have quite a bit of rules. Our state statutes dictate that our program will follow federal rules with our state funds. We do have some flexibility and do have some exceptions where we feel the DOE, like they don't allow you to go back and fix a home with DOE funds, and we think that's important. So we do that with state funds. But in general, we follow federal rules. So we don't have the ability to just say, all right, we're going to do this with our state funds. We do to some degree, but you know, we need to follow the statutes and run a federal program that matches our state program. So one quick other thing, we are coming in the next we have to braid our state funds with our federal funds to get the allowable cost per unit up to a feasible number, which is about $15,000 per unit to properly weatherize a home. DOE only allows $8,000 per home. So we match state with federal. So long story short, it eats up our state funds to have a separate weatherization grant that has more flexibility. We are going to approach a funding cliff here. I mean, we've ramped up quite a bit in the last 2 years, 50% over what we were spending 2 years ago, but we're about at a plateau. So if that's info you'd like, anyway.
Oh, that was great. Yeah, I just wanted some more detail on that. Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks. We'll go to Jen, and then I also want to check in with Pike and Chris and Emily if there's anything that hasn't been said, if like on a different topic that you want to jump in on, or just questions. I want to make sure that you have space to speak as well. So with that, we'll go over to Jen.
Jeff, I'm just curious, how will the money coming in through the Department of Public Service in the homes and the here? I was just on a small presentation. It was an excellent presentation by the Department of Public Service, that grant that's coming in. And I'm just curious how you anticipate that interacting with weatherization.
Sure. We're meeting weekly with Ian, I think, who gave that presentation, and Melissa Bailey and Kelly Launder on the details of they've got to produce a plan to DOE on the IRA funds, and their goal is to shift a lot of it over to us to weatherize homes in the same manner we are now, not doing the heat pumps with the core 29 million. So working with them, if we get those funds, a big question is will or will we not have to braid our HWAP funds with the IRA funds. They're going to try to propose that the IRA funds pay for everything, which would be huge. But anyway, we see those funds being used in the same way that we are weatherizing a home now.
Great. So I'll give a moment for anyone who hasn't had the chance to speak yet. If you have any questions or thoughts to add to the low income section.
And I'm pretty sure that 29 million is public information at this point, but no big deal.
It was on that webinar, so.
Okay, great.
All right, Ben.
Excuse me. Yeah, just another kind of random question, Jeff, but it's come up in conversations over the last couple of weeks. Chris and I have been, chatting about mobile home, how we can help mobile home owners. Do you think, this is just kind of a hypothetical, but if the weatherization program had the ability to replace mobile homes, rather than weatherizing, like a super old mobile home, do you think that would be beneficial? I mean, because at a certain point, it's like putting a Band-Aid on the problem if it's a really old mobile home. And yes, you might be able to weatherize it, but you know, if it's got aluminum wiring and the whole deal, ends up being pretty costly.
Yeah. It all depends on the mobile home. We go into some that are 40 years old and they're meticulous, well maintained, and we can weatherize that building and save 30% of their heating bills. And others are not maintained and have leaky roofs and rotted floors. It all depends on the mobile home. If you're going to replace it, you're going to have to pay for all of it because the clients won't be able to take out a loan.
Right. Yeah. Just a, you know, a thought that myself and others have had is, you know, if given that WAP is already in the mobile home and liaisoning with the client, you know, just kind of thinking outside the box in the context of the clean heat standard, how we can help these folks access clean heat measures. You know, if we were to kind of braid programs where it'd be, you know, like mobile home replacement program kind of braided with your program to come together and make it happen, you know, using a variety of federal funds, etc. Just a thought, you know.
A lot of our clients live in mobile homes. I think 30% of our units every year are mobile homes. We do a very good job on that. We insulate the top and the bottom, the roof and the belly, and we get good air sealing results. What is the durability of them? Are they a 30-year measure? I don't know. In some cases they are, some they're not. But a lot of our clients live in mobile homes and that's all they can afford. And we do a good job making them more comfortable and cheaper, less expensive to live in.
Go ahead, Pike.
Just wondering what percentage of the properties you do are rental units?
40% a year, and that includes 1 to 100 units per building. And 100 is, you know, the top end. It's not a limit at the top. Basically, our 5 local providers weatherize 1 to 4 units homes, and some of those are rentals, a small percentage. And then we have 1 statewide multifamily provider, 3E Thermal, who weatherizes 5 and above multifamily projects. And of our total units, which this year is going to be about 1,400, I would say 35 to 40% will be rentals.
And how are the eligibility requirements calculated for multi-units? Do all tenants have to be low income?
Yes, certain number of tenants need to be income eligible depending on the funding source. With federal funds, it's 66% of the units need to be income eligible to our program income guidelines or be on a HUD list. And with state weatherization funds, 25% of the units 5 and above need to be income eligible. For the 1 to 4 unit rentals, it's usually a minimum of 2 need to be income eligible.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right, Jeff, what was the state number?
25%.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Dominic, for your work on this. We'll give you a few seconds to catch up before going to Matt.
Yeah, thank you. I got a little behind on this one.
Right. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, I just wanted 2 comments. One is, and I had this conversation offline with Jeff, and I appreciate that, Jeff, which is there are some stipulations on landlords who receive, because it's still there's no cost for a landlord that owns this building. So there are some stipulations which some landlords may willingly accept because they're going to hold on to that property and they're not going to flip it. Others might be reluctant to proceed, even though the tenants may want it and may want to save money and save energy. It's really up to the landlord to make that decision, and he has to agree. I can't remember all the decisions, but that's a hurdle.
So I'll fill in the blanks there, Matt. The owner of the property has to agree to certain owner responsibilities. And those are basically a safe heating system. If there's any structural issues that prohibit our weatherization, they need to take care of them. Bathroom ventilation, they have to pay for that. They need to make sure the place is safe. You know, we're not a code police, but if there's any flagrant issues, we won't weatherize the place until they address it as well as that list that we have, that's their responsibilities. Once they do that, we go in and we'll do all the energy efficiency work for free, which can be a significant amount of work. They do have to sign a rent stabilization agreement that we've just updated recently in the last year, and it says they won't raise their income eligible clients rents more than 2% a year. We wanted no percentage a year, had a lot of pushback because of inflation and things, so it's 2% a year. Looking over at Rob to make sure I got that number right. It's either 2 or 3% a year for 3 or 5 years. I should have pulled that out. I think it's 5 years. I can't keep everything straight, but there is a rent stabilization agreement.
And the other thing, if I could, Shira, was just respond to Ben. You know, Ben, this is a challenging problem. It's not unsolvable, but it's very difficult to solve. And one of the things that was brought up during the formulation of this legislation was proposed to exempt mobile homes that use kerosene, because these are very difficult to convert and they have exposed water pipes, and that could lead to disaster in the wintertime. And there was a stipulation that a clean heat credit could be obtained if there was a zero emission module unit was put in place, just like you suggested. Although that's not, it required a ZEM, not, you know, so if you're going to do $80,000 worth of weatherization work, why not just replace the mobile home unit? That I get where you're going there, Ben. But it would have to require some change either in the law or something decided by the PUC, because it says ZEMs, which are, as you know, 3-4 times more expensive than a regular standard mobile home. But it's an interesting idea. Thank you.
We'll go to Mia.
Yeah, on the manufactured home replacement, housing funders are doing some of this work, and I think there is a recognition and trend towards zero energy modular homes. Of course, they are more expensive, which limits the ability to purchase new homes. And you know, as people have pointed out, it's hard for the average household to even afford a subsidized mortgage on that. So I think the trend is towards that direction of the zero energy one, but the housing funding pool to fund manufactured home replacement is not extensive. So yeah, but I think one thing that will be good for this group to consider, and I don't really have an answer, is I'm not seeing we know that there's going to have to be a certain number of 16% of measures have to go towards low income households. And, you know, based on what Jeff and others have said, it seems really unlikely that these households are going to be able to pay for much of that out of pocket. I'm sure it does happen, but not on a huge scale. So the way I'm kind of seeing this all working is that virtually all of the low income credits, at least for installed measures, are likely going to come out of the WAP program. And I'm not really sure what that will mean for the final implementation, but I think it is going to be disproportionately in that direction. And I think that's important for us to consider what the marketplace looks like and what the impacts of that will be. But I don't have a great answer for that yet, but that's kind of how I see it going. Thanks.
Thanks, Mia. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Mia. And I think where my mind goes, you know, separate from weatherization program is, you know, we talked about the ability or inability for folks to obtain financing. But then, and I know you definitely know about this space as well, as kind of, you know, a tariff-based financing, you know, could that be utilized to, you know, like the on-bill financing to finance some of these measures for folks? And if that was the case, you know, could the terms of that be tweaked to have, like, for example, or like a longer, like a 30-year payback time, or you know, the societal, like the traditional cost effectiveness test of that, like, be tweaked to accommodate low income folks? You know, this is an area that I've kind of just started looking into and had discussions about, but like, I think, you know, that would be in the charge of the EAG, is to kind of figure that out, so that you could broaden that list of options for these low income folks, you know. So you know, could they use the on-bill financing to finance something as big as like a mobile home replacement, as long as the terms were changed, like longer paybacks, aside, like the cost effectiveness test, you know, maybe that could be changed to be more of like a low income specific test, etc. So just kind of a preliminary thoughts on that, but I think that might be something that we collectively look into to try to broaden the pool of options for these folks, and thereby the options for obligated parties to obtain credits. So just a thought.
Thank you, Ben. And since we have a little moment, two things on my end. One, if anybody normally we try to avoid using the chat because it means that I have to read it out for the open meeting law. But I know that this is kind of a rapid fire conversation, and sometimes people need a little bit of time to think and compose their thought. So if you have a thought and you're thinking about it, but you need like more time to compose it, feel free to write it in the chat if that's more helpful for you. And then I'll just go ahead and read it out and copy and paste it into the worksheet. On the other end, since this is a longer section, I do want to make sure that we have some time for public comment. So I'll give the EAG another chance for anything else, but we'll pause for public comment in a few minutes, and then we'll have another public comment portion at the end of this section. So EAG, is there anything else that you want to follow on this thread before I open up to public comment? And yes, I see your hand, Jeff. Go ahead. Oh, you're on mute.
So I was just thinking of the 16% low income, whatever that definition is. I was thinking of it differently than Mia was. Like I was assuming the credits had to come from the low income, meaning you could buy low income weatherization credits, meaning clients are going to benefit, low income clients are going to benefit from that 16% because it's going to be provided to them. They're not going to buy any, but maybe that's wrong. That's how I'm not thinking. Like if Vermont Gas wanted to buy credits from the low income program to meet the 16% minimum, is how as I was looking at it, and I may be totally wrong. But my question prior to this day was, why is it so low in the 60? Why is 16% so low when there's a lot more than 16% low income Vermonters? But it could be because that could be a good thing, because I was thinking about it the wrong way, that we're thinking 16 low income folks are gonna buy credits up to the 16. Anyway, none of that probably made sense, and I'm sorry, but
no, Jeff, I think you had it right. Yeah, their first way of thinking about it was correct. Yeah. So
okay.
Obligated
Why is
parties
that
need
so low?
16%. Yeah, that's the follow-up question to that. Yeah. I think we were talking about that, the whether or not LMI credits should be front loaded or prioritized, to a higher percentage, but I'll be reporting on kind of what we talked about in that group here in a little bit, but yeah.
Okay. All right.
You were thinking about it correctly though. So
all right, thanks.
Go ahead, Mia.
Yeah, I followed a little bit when this bill was created, and Matt might have a little bit more input. I don't know that the 16 and 16% for low and moderate income are tied to anything specific. I think it was more in the realm of people thinking that was what was somewhat possible. And again, I don't know that there was like exact math done to figure that out, but Matt could jump in if he thinks that there's like a genesis of that particular number. I'm not sure if he knows. But I was just saying that just based on how sort of low income weatherization and heat pump projects are being done, I'm not aware of too much work going on in that space outside of the WAP program due to the major technical and financial challenges of that. So that's the reason I was saying that going forward, I think the only place for generating those installed projects is probably going to be through the WAP program, and to like a limited degree through like Efficiency Vermont rebates and supporting those. But that's what I was just saying. Unless the landscape of how we do that work in Vermont changes significantly, I think it's those credits are going to be produced from the work that the WAPs do, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Ben, I saw your hand briefly.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of piggyback off what Mia just said, but you know, I think if we really want to broaden the ability for low-income people to benefit from this, I think we do need to change how we do stuff here in Vermont with all these efficiency programs. You know, one glaring example I could think of is while we have, you know, literally dozens of programs that do serve that, you know, population of folks that's just above the income threshold for the WAP program, those folks are still struggling. They just can't get into the WAP program. So how do we bring them into the fold and, you know, allow them to take advantage of all these other efficiency programs that are out there? And really the one major barrier to that is that it's really complicated for the average person to navigate that space because there's so many different programs from various providers of funding that you really have to, you know, there's a lot of fine print. You really have to know like what you're after to figure out what is right for you. So, you know, a way to like basically unify some sort of like unifying mechanism for these efficiency programs, I think would be really helpful. And I think that that might be an area that we as the EAG recommend that something like that be done. You know, I don't know if it's a phone number folks can call, you know, like you know, dial in and you'll go get a call center and they'll say, yep, like you're right for these products, these efficiency products, and you're connected to, you know, whoever's offering it to get the application process started. But you know, I think the income threshold for your program, Jeff, is what, 80% AMI and lower. Yeah, so if you're 81% AMI, you're still struggling. For sure. But there are programs out there to help you. It's just hard to find them. So I think that's something that we should definitely think about when it comes to the final report here.
Thanks, Ben. So some kind of alignment between the different programs that are working in the same space. Thanks. So we'll go to Jen and then we'll go to Matt and then I will open it up for public comment. So we'll go ahead to you, Jen.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great point, Ben, and that's the theory behind the grant I've been working in, the Green Saving Smart, was that we would have, as well as being financial coaches, we're energy navigators. So having some training and keeping on top of what all the programs are. And that's often when someone comes and needs help in that area, that's what we do. So I think having navigators is very important. I think the Agency of Natural Resources, through their new EPA loan, requested to have that kind of, you know, a navigator. But I agree, you know, we have 5 coaches in the program and each one in each of the community action, but it wasn't quite enough. And that idea of having a place where people can come to get that idea is important. I did just go on, VCAN just had a webinar on the Rewiring America calculator, has now been connected with Vermont incentives. So you can go on that calculator now and it will bring up Vermont specific incentives, similar to what Drive Electric Vermont does for the car incentives. But I think that's a really good point, and a point that can really be beefed up. I think we sometimes think of Vermont as much smaller than it is, and having people come and having access to something that will help you navigate all the many incentives is really needed.
Yeah, so the importance of, for especially this group, having some type of navigation support built in. I see Emily also has dropped the web link for Rewiring America. So it's https://homes.rewiringamerica.org/calculator. So we'll move over. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I've been part of this legislation, this policy since it was infancy. And I promise not to get into the politics of it, but I have lots to say about that, but not here. But if you look at it, you open the door and we are the EAG, so let's just comment on it. 2/3 of the credits, 2/3 can go to people of any income, high income. And why? Why isn't the other way around? Why isn't 1/3 for the upper income and 2/3 for lower income, lower middle income? And I think the answer is, because I was there for the discussions, is that the point of the policy is not necessarily to help low-income Vermonters. That's the weatherization program. That's what it was set up in 1980, and that's what it's been doing for 40 years. The point of the policy for this is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% below 1990 levels in the thermal sector. And making sure that 2/3 go to houses that of like my house, is a way that I think the policy designers felt that we could actually achieve the mandates in the Global Warming Solutions Act. In other words, if we just focused our attention on those that spend the greatest amount of their income, household income, on energy, if we just focused on those that could least afford to do the changes they need to do to reduce their energy burden and their greenhouse gas emissions, we wouldn't meet the mandate. And it would cost more because they're also less able to make that investment themselves. So this is a political solution to achieve the mandates of a 2020 law, and not actually designed in order to help low-income Vermonters reduce their energy burden and their greenhouse gas emissions. Full stop. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so thinking about the competing tensions between the objectives of the law and what being able to help, whether it's the objective is to help low-income households. Thank you. So with that,
Sorry, just blipped out for a minute. I started taking notes on the last thing I had. Matt, did I miss anything at the? Sorry, my thing isn't loading. I've typed more than that.
While he's typing, could I just make a quick comment?
Please.
yeah, go ahead.
I fully agree with what Matt just said, and I think being the equity group, that's why we're here. And I'd hate to just have Matt make that comment and then we move on. Can we put it on the next agenda or take time to talk more about it to see if we all agree with that, and if it's something we can move forward to propose or push back on those, what Matt just said?
I'm making a note of it so we can talk about it at the next planning session.
Okay, thanks.
I would note, just as chair, that it is always helpful when we have, I mean, we can always carve out time for discussions about things. I think just what action you'd like to see out of it, or even just like how you'd like that to appear in our final report is helpful to guide those discussions and make them productive.
Yeah, I would like to see it reversed, like 2/3 be for low to moderate income, or whatever, a much fair percentage helping those that need the help, and not go into second homes, heat pumps and stuff.
And I would just add that we are sort of grappling with some of that scope in the the credit issues group, at least front loading it, though we had not discussed actually changing it, which would be required by the legislature. So that is a place for that discussion, but I can certainly work with Ashira to come up with a way to put that on the agenda if there's desire from the group.
Desire from myself.
Second that. And I was just going to say, I actually think that, the front loading conversation is exactly kind of what we're talking about here. Because I think there is the ability to front load as many low income credits as is reasonably possible. So if we can come up with a plan, but talking about this framework, this equity framework, all these various programs in the state, if we are able to kind of braid those all together and come up with a pathway by which is going to be an equitable one for folks, then I think we could get close to achieving, flipping that, those requirements. It really just depends on cost and a whole number of things. But yeah, that conversation I think is ongoing in the credit group, as Mia just mentioned. So
Thanks, Ben. With that, I'm going to go ahead and open it to public comment. And just a reminder about public comment, we ask that you keep your comments to 2 minutes initially, so that we can make sure that we get through as many people as we can. And if we don't have any additional comments, or if we have time left over, then we'll circle back to you to continue your thought. So with that, I'll go ahead and open.
And I just want to say, by the way, I will not be putting these, unless the group would like, into this document. I'll keep a separate document and put into the minutes. Is that good for the group? Okay.
Hello, this is John McCormick.
Hi, John. Go ahead.
Hello. Yes.
Here you
I wanted to second what Matt said. It was so profound. It should have been said in the first meeting of the EAG. I mean, if we're not going to be looking at how to not relieve, but eliminate the potential suffering that this bill will create, then we're going to live with the consequences. Now, Ben mentioned, well, how about the lower median income? Is it possible that they might also benefit from some of the grants that WAP provides? Again, I sent you all a draft of a bill that would reauthorize Weatherization Assistance Program, and it would allow WAP to move up into the lower median income stratum. But it would need more workers, wouldn't it? Raise their salaries $10 over several years. How do you pay for that? You increase the fee from 2 cents to 4 cents to 6 cents to 8 cents over several years. I mean, you're all creating a Gordian knot. And what we already have is what Jeff Wilcox has been describing to you, a very efficient program that needs more money and more workers. When it gets them, there will be more weatherizations. We're not going to meet the 2020 mandate. We're just not. And I think the judge will say, well, you're really trying. You've got a good weatherization assistance program. Amen.
Thank you, John. I'll open up for any other comments and then get some replies from the EAG. All right. Ben, do you have a reply?
Yeah. I just want to say, I think the idea that John has raised about, increasing funding to the WAPs as a separate introduced bill is definitely not a bad one. But also just wanted to, point out that the Clean Heat Standard, is law, and we, as the Equity Advisory Group, are charged with ensuring that we eliminate as much harm, on the low and moderate income population in Vermont as possible. So while alternatives like that one are good thoughts, I think it's also important that we stay focused on the task at hand and focus on the Clean Heat Standard for now, and focus on producing the best possible equity outcome that we can achieve now. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Thanks, Ben. Ike?
Yeah, if we're looking for reply comments to McCormick's comments, I completely agree with all he has been saying. This, I think, even though I'm a member of this EAG group, I think the whole Clean Heat Standard from before it became law, you know, when you look back into the meeting minutes, was a boondoggle that really is designed to support entrenched interests at the expense of what could have been a simpler, easier, cheaper, more effective solution to lowering our greenhouse gases. You know, this was designed by primarily Vermont Gas and Energy Action Network, which is a unlicensed lobbying organization that lobbies on behalf of Vermont Gas and Burlington Electric and others. And the white paper and the meeting minutes just demonstrate how this was designed to promote their interests with the idea of also reducing greenhouse gases. And there could have been a lot simpler solution out there. Thanks.
Thanks, Pike. Chris.
So just kind of sticking in the spirit of what Ben was referring, you know, I'm kind of focused on if implemented, and I'm kind of seeing our duties as really calling out any gaps so that legislators can make an informed decision on a path forward and help the PUC, you know, design the best program. So it's not necessarily like a up or down. I have struggled about understanding how does the clean heat standard benefit low income households? Just what's it bring to the table? And it's just really become apparent the more we talk about a just transition for low income households that the tools really don't reside inside the clean heat standard. It's bolstering programs that exist outside of clean heat. It's WAP, it's a more coordinated statewide system, like just the tools to really help, you know, whether they're a renter or a homeowner, they live in a multifamily or it's a single family home or it's a manufactured home. We often refer to low income households like it's just one bucket, and it's not. It's a lot of different needs. So I think one thing that's really stood out is it's been a little frustrating to have equity delegated to a third party, like, hey, here's the policy, go make it equitable. And just that there's just a front end assumption that it can be. So you just need to figure out how to make it work. It's just difficult when you hear like, hey, there's all these barriers to you accessing these measures and those benefits. But at the same time, so your comfort and your heating prices could go up because, you know, we want to incentivize or penalize people to move off of fossil fuels and get onto an alternative, while, you know, higher income households are able to benefit. It feels disproportionate. And just from a equity stance, if somebody was to feel the impact of this clean heat standard monetarily or from a health impact, like they can't access these programs, there should be some kind of wholesome exemption or a stage-in period of, you know, they're not going to feel those price increases until those programs are accessible. There's just this baseline assumption in a lot of circles that, hey, we've got these great programs that already exist. We've got WAP, we've got all these energy efficiency pieces. Like there's IRA funding that's already available. So why is it when you walk through low income housing, like you don't see that in the actual housing? So there's just existing gaps here that the clean heat standard is not going to solve. In a lot of our recommendations that we can make is outside of clean heat. So just saying that, let me just stop there, and I've rambled on for a little bit. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. And just a few housekeeping notes. I went ahead, if you're not currently speaking, if you could go ahead and mute yourself. I went ahead and muted everyone who wasn't speaking, just to eliminate the background noise. So if you need to talk again, just feel free to unmute yourself. Also, Emily put in the chat more information regarding the calculator and it being Vermont specific. So I'll go ahead and copy that link that she shared into the document so that everyone has access to it. And with that, I'll hand it over to Pike and then Jeff.
Yeah, I think Ben said that, this is now law, and I wanted to respond to that and to Chris's comment and remind us, as Matt has reminded us again and again, that this doesn't really become law until the legislature votes on it again. And, if we find that there are serious problems with this clean heat standard as designed and contemplated so far, we can recommend that, larger changes, or it not be, recommend that the legislator doesn't vote for it. So, it's law as it stands now, but there is a second vote. So I just wanted to remind folks about that, because Matt hasn't done it this week yet.
Thank you. Pike, is your hand still up, or did you? Okay. Yeah. Jeff and then Ben.
I just want to say I appreciate what Chris just said, and I agree with a lot, if not all, of what he said. And I think I was starting, when these meetings started, I was thinking I was going to be the only one who was, I don't want to say opposed to this heat standard, but I guess that what it boils down to. I'm opposed to the negative effects it'll have on our low and moderate income clients. And I think our duty is to not just assume it's a slow moving train is going to happen. And I don't think anybody's doing that, but we need to think out, like Matt's comment on the percentage and proposing, like some of the stuff Chris is saying. That's what we're here for. It may not be what the people who created this clean heat standard want to hear, but it's our job is to advocate for the people who are going to be harmed by this. And I just want to sum it up by appreciating what you said, Chris, and I agree with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Ben?
Yeah, I just agree with what Jeff just said in a lot of ways, but also just wanted to thank Pike for the clarification. And I just wanted to, I guess, reiterate or clarify what I was saying, and that's that we need to assume that this is going to be implemented. I think for us not to assume, or to assume that this is not going to be implemented, would be to abdicating our responsibility here. To what Jeff just said, like, we have to assume this is going to be implemented, and we need to we are the ones charged with coming up with, various ways to reduce harm on the low-income population. So whether or not folks are opposed to it, I think that's personal opinion, but I think we are charged with figuring out how we can make this as equitable as possible, and we have to assume it's going to be implemented. So here we are, and we should go forward with that in mind.
Thanks, Ben. Dominic, I wanted to check in with you real quick if the responses from the EAG members could be also added to this document.
Sure. These were moving a little faster, so the notes aren't as great, and I make no claims to correct spelling, but I'll drop those in.
We appreciate it. And everyone, all of the EAG members have access. So if you need, you can put a comment if something's mischaracterized or anything like that. You can comment directly.
And this is also recorded.
And this is also recorded. Great. Anyone else? Any thoughts? Emily?
This is a complete side note, but just wanted to give the group a heads up. I'll be gone from 2 to 2:30 for an appointment, but I will be back soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Emily. So Ashir, I don't know if where you wanted to go with moving on to the next item proposed by Srini, or wrap this up in any way. I think there'll be more comments on low income households, in future ones. So I don't know if it makes sense to just stop here, but I'll defer to you on facilitating that.
Definitely. No, I appreciate the time check. It got so dove a little too deep, but we're right at the time that we expected. So I do want to quickly just open it up one more time, as I promised, to one last round of public comments for this section, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the next section. So any public comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move to the next item, which was proposed by Srini, which is just a moment to kind of take stock. So we kind of did this brain dump, not just for the low income section, but for each of the sections. We did a little brain dump, but we never really revisited our sections and kind of thought through, okay, where is this going in the larger scheme of things? So Srini suggested that we take a moment to each look at our sections as the section leaders, and identify one or two issues in your section that you might need additional help with. So you can think through it, and think about a place that you might need specific help. We'll go around and talk through that. And then if we have time, we'll do a second round, thinking about if there's any areas in your segment that could use specific input from the tag. So are there any sections that we could collaborate with the tag? So I'll give you a couple moments to think about and jot down what you might need help with in your section, what additional support you might need. And then we'll go through and just talk to each other about it maybe, and find some points of connection. And as a heads up, if it's okay, Emily, we'll start with you since you'll have to jump off first.
Did you want me to answer the question of like what section in my
Yep.
section I would need
If
help
you're
with?
ready, whenever you're ready, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, well, let me just pull it up again. I don't think I have a clear answer to that. I think what would be helpful for me is if anyone has information on any of these topics they'd like to share. I feel that way about offering information that I have as well. I know we have some subject matter experts at Efficiency Vermont and VEIC that would be happy to share really specific information, for example, in the low income section and then in other sections. So I think, yeah, this may not be what you want, but I think what would be helpful for me moving forward and starting to fill out my section and other sections is how can I, advance notice of like, we're going to work on this section and this specifically so that I can bring in people who may have information to share since we aren't able to work on things outside of public meeting time. Yeah, is that helpful or very not helpful?
That's helpful.
Okay.
And yeah, and if you think of anything specifically for the moderate income Vermonters, any questions or thoughts, feel free to let us know. And so with that, yeah, go ahead, Jeff. Oop, you're on mute.
Is this the time to ask questions on content or concerns or yes? So Emily, please don't take any offense to this on behalf of Efficiency Vermont. Before I worked at the state, I worked for one of the local weatherizations, and my ending years I did fee for service audits, and I'm quite familiar with how the program was back then. I don't know if it's the same now. It's quite a few years later, but my assumption is moderate income folks who pay for an energy audit and then receive incentives to do work get to pick and choose really like what they want to do because it's their own money and they should be able to pick and choose. And as a result, you don't necessarily get, you know, a full weatherization project. You know, they could just pick, I want a heat pump. Well, maybe not that extreme. I just want to insulate my basement sills and I don't want to address the 30 recessed lights that are leaking to the attic. So I've always worried when this type of stuff is talked about at the state, not the state isn't, well, efficiency programs, there's a lot to it. Our experience is you got to have clear expectations in a technical manual, what describes the work. And then you have to have good quality inspections. I'm just wondering how, like, is there any talk about program design and like, will clients still be able to pick and choose and maybe just do a couple of measures and get a heat pump when there's so much more cost-effective savings out there that they just don't want to pay for? Seems like there's a lot, and then it's not just on efficiency or all these things in general. There's a lot to making sure heat pump installations exceed, solar exceeds, whatever. And it starts with to me, a good, thorough energy audit and quality control inspection to making sure you're actually getting the savings that was proposed. And I'm sorry if that was too much for this little piece in time, but anyway.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. And we've noted that. I should be more clear in my instructions. I did mean I thought you were asking about the content in
Oh, sorry.
section. So this is more of just a kind of like, these are the questions that I have, and these are some things that we can start thinking about so other people can reach out to you.
Go back and delete the last 5 minutes. Sorry.
No worries. And we have about 7 minutes for this activity, so that kind of gives you a
Gotcha.
idea of what we're looking for. But yeah, I'll go ahead now and just go down the list as I see them. So Ben, are you ready?
Sure. Yeah, so I had, my topic was a little less targeted than other folks. I think, broadly it was households and homes not readily able to access clean heat measures. So I've been, in my mind, kind of focusing a lot on the mobile home population or thinking about them, doing research on that, as well as the rental population. And I think, really just been doing a lot of literature review and talking to different folks in that space to inform that section. And I will just note that there's other people working on those exact there's other people writing about in this document, writing about the split incentive, etc. So I don't have a corner of the market there, but yeah. So I mean, I'm sure the tag could probably provide some in the mobile home space, maybe some recommendations there, although I'll note that I think in this group we probably have really good mobile home expertise as well, maybe more so than the tag. So yeah, I'm just kind of building those sections out kind of off on the side myself without having added much to this, just because I'm kind of formulating how I want to put it in there. But also, again, noting that my section was overlaps with almost every other person's section. So yeah, there's a lot there. But yep, so really just focusing on gathering additional information to inform those sections, whether it's my specific sections here or I know Chris is doing a lot of work in the manufactured home section as well. So
Thanks, Ben. We'll move down to Jen. Jen, are any specific areas that you need help or support in?
I have good support at CVOEO. We have an excellent Office of Racial Equity and Inclusion, so I'm going to be in touch with them. I don't have a lot of contacts with indigenous groups. So if somebody has had experience or knows somebody I can talk to about ways that there are certain barriers or effects that this might have on indigenous groups or other minorities, let me know. I welcome any contacts in that area.
And on that note, with that specific ask, is there anybody that does or know somebody that Jen can contact? Go ahead, Pike.
Judy Dow is on one of the subcommittees in the Climate Council, and you might be able to reach out to her.
Thank you.
Pike,
do
what was
that.
that last name?
The last name is Dow, D-O-W. I haven't asked her, so I don't know if she could help, but possibly.
Okay, thanks. I'll reach out.
So, Jeff, we did a pretty big deep dive in yours today, but if there's any other things that you need help or
No, I'm sure you're all sick of hearing me talk anyway, so I'll go on mute.
no worries. Matt.
Yes. What would you like to comment on to share?
Hmm?
Tell me a little bit more about what you want me to, do you want me to comment just on my pieces or on?
No, so if there are any specific things in your section that you need help or support on,
Oh, I see.
like questions that you have, anything like that.
I don't at this time. Sorry to
No worries.
disappoint you. Okay.
Not a disappointment at all. And we just did Emily, and so we'll move to Chris.
Accessibility is a kind of a topic I'd like to document a little better about kind of current state to access programs like outside of, I recommend somebody call Jeff's group to access the weatherization, like it's just not clear like who can assist somebody if they wanted to complete a conversion to a heat pump. They're moving off of kerosene. Who's their liaison that would be able to help them navigate kind of current state. We kind of talked about, we want to move towards a more unified statewide system that's kind of better organized. Just that's one. And the second is more on the electrical company side. We've been talking about infrastructure, and I haven't really heard from folks about, like, one of the barriers that came up was GMP owns the lines, but when you get to a park, the lines from GMP's pole to that home is actually owned by the park. So just I haven't really engaged the electric company at all, just about serving rural Vermont and helping in that transition. So just those are two areas that needs a little work.
Thanks, Chris. And so since that was a specific ask as well, does anybody have contacts or might be able to offer support?
I'll pipe up and say GMP, BED, and I'm not sure about VIPSA, but there have been some comments filed in the 23-2220- rule case from electric utilities, and whomever signed that at the bottom, at least theoretically, is keeping up what's happening in this space and might be able to bridge that gap.
Thanks, Dominic.
Moving on to Pike. Any spaces that you need help with, support, questions?
Well, I currently have a disorganized list of bullet points that need to be put in some kind of coherent paragraph structured document. If someone wants to help with that, great. Beyond that, there might be things that I need help with that I'm not even aware of. So any feedback at this point would be also helpful.
Great. Yeah, Mia.
Yeah, I just think it's going to be really different depending on like small multifamily ones that are taken care of by the WAP program, and the larger multifamily ones, which sort of have a different entry point. And then also subsidized housing, which has its own challenges, and then, you know, market rate housing that has, you know, more of the split incentive issues. I guess I would say both of the split incentive issues, but in different ways. So I think renters is a big category, and so sort of looking at the different types of homes that renters live in, I think will be helpful for this section.
Yeah, and that might be getting into research that I'm not prepared to do. So if there are if there's documents and research and information out there that, you know, helps differentiate how many large rental units there are versus small rental units, et cetera, great. But I wouldn't know where to start to look for that information. I haven't reached out twice to Vermont Apartment Owners Association to get any feedback from them on the clean heat standard, and they have ignored my questions. So yeah, but I don't know where to move forward with more information on this.
My agency has done a decent amount of research on kind of what our stock looks like, so I'd be happy to kind of point you in the direction of resources that we've produced. I know Chris is pretty familiar with a lot of this as well, and Jeff has his hand up. I know certainly on what WAP is doing, he has a good eye on.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm happy to help. Got a lot of experience with rental through low income. And there are some HUD lists, the DOE issues that are auto qualified for weatherization. I'm happy to help point you in the right direction.
Yeah, I like that when you just said happy to help.
Yeah, I'm right in the same boat as you.
Yeah. Okay, does anybody else for Pike helping with Pike? Okay. Shuni's not here. And then Matt, you also had obligated parties. You also, I did see your side message about you remembered what you needed help with. So
Yeah, I apologize for that. Yeah, I had two things. And the first one, Jeff helped me out a lot, and Richard Giddings helped me a lot dealing with LIHEAP. And I think what I said still stands, but I need to change something about the renters and the ability for them to access their landlords being able to access weatherization. But the thing that I do need help with is the second thing, dealing with obligated parties.
Okay.
And my paragraphs dealing with that was just to highlight, just like we have this friction between wanting to comply or needing to comply with the mandate to reduce greenhouse gas emissions versus trying to help those that can least afford higher energy bills mitigate that. We have that same issue with compliance with the obligated parties. So we know that there's over 200 entities that sell fuel into Vermont that are required to register first by January 31st of this year because of the new law by June 30th next year. And they'll be the ones that have to record every gallon. The PUC will have to track that gallon as it crosses into Vermont and where it is ultimately consumed. And the concern is that if there is not compliance, if we don't identify all of the entities that sell fuel enter into Vermont and then use that list to then narrow that to those obligated parties, then in fact, it will be quite easy for people to cheat. And if people cheat, the honest people that pay and their customers will end up funding this and will end up going bankrupt. We don't have in the deliverable fuel industry the warm cloak of a regulatory procedure. We have a guaranteed monopoly and a guaranteed rate of return. Businesses can and do fail every year because they don't price their product right or they don't run their business right. But if that reason why they fail and go bankrupt and the loss of jobs and the economic harm and the environmental harm that comes from that is because the PUC can't even recognize who the obligated entities are, who sells fuel into Vermont, and how to make sure that they track those gallons from bringing into Vermont to ultimate consumption, then this is bringing chaos into the distribution of the essential commodity that provides heat and hot water to Vermonters in the coldest winter months. This has to change, and we need help. And by my count, only 60% of those that sell fuel into Vermont by publicly available lists have in fact registered. That is a problem because it doesn't just harm the individuals that sell fuel into Vermont, but it impacts their customers. It impacts competition. So we need help, or this program, if it passes, will be a disaster.
And Matt, do you have any specific requests for the EAG for the EAG on helping to fill out this section?
It was the EAG to request that the Department of Public Service and the Public Utility Commission develop a methodology in order to ensure that the vast majority, or ideally all, of those entities that sell fuel into Vermont have registered in compliance with the law.
So no specific requests for filling out this section.
No, I guess I just would like a request that the DPS and PUC get everyone registered. Thank you.
Well heard. Thank you, Matt. Ben, go ahead.
I think it's a great point, Matt, and I just wanted to mention that the PUC is the ones responsible for the registry. We have access to the data, but I think we would echo your concern.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, with that, I think we've made it through the list. So thank you all. And right now we had time held for public comment, but since we took public comment throughout, I'm gonna go ahead and skip this public comment period. We do have another public comment period at the end of today's meeting. And we'll go ahead and move into feedback from the credit issues subgroup. So that will be Ben, if you're ready for that.
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
sorry, Ben, but before you do that, I'm just gonna go ahead. Dominic, if you're finished making your edits, I'm gonna go ahead and make this ineditable. So now people will only be able to view. Great. And with that, we'll go ahead and move on.
All right, great. Yeah, so we had a really healthy discussion at the meeting last week on June 5th, which was the first meeting of the newly, I guess, renamed credit issues subgroup of the Equity Advisory Group. We were joined by a couple TAG members. Ken Jones and Rick Weston were there to offer their comments as well. And we decided most of the discussion was focused on, it was kind of a broad topic to start, but we decided a lot of the discussion was on whether or not, and if so, how to front load or prioritize low and moderate income credits. I think we touched upon it a little bit ago in this meeting. But there was kind of a number of broad themes associated with that. No concrete decisions were made on that front, but just more of a brainstorming session as to what are the things that we need to keep in mind when considering that question as to whether or not to front load an increased amount of low and moderate income credits. So, first, it was raised that, we really need to keep our the target of 40% reduction below 1990 levels of greenhouse gases. That needs to be kept in mind when determining whether or not to front load LMI credits. We know that low income households generally use less energy than high income earning households. So just the question of meeting GWSA targets, what would that do if we were to front load a greater percentage of LMI credits? What would that do in terms of our the pacing discussion that's occurring now? How would that affect pacing, and would it affect basically the rate at which we're able to reduce greenhouse gases if we were to do a greater percentage of LMI? And then kind of following that same train of thought, it was brought up, I think Srini brought it up, and I think it was a great point. Should we be using, when considering this question, should we be using a data-driven approach to determine what percentage increase is needed in LMI credits. I think broadly the question of whether or not we should front load LMI credits, in terms of equity, if it's a yes or no question, I think yes would be the answer. It'd be more equitable, to serve a greater percentage of those folks every year. But to determine the amount that needs to be front loaded, I think it's very important that a data-driven approach needs to be used to determine how much that increase should go up by, and gathering data to those ends. Was also raised the question of if we were to front load LMI credits, would there be folks opined on the fact we don't know the credit price yet, but will there be different tiers of credit pricing? A low income price, a moderate income price, and a market rate price. We know that low income credits might require a greater effort, and therefore more resources may be required to obtain low and moderate income credits. So folks opined on that as to whether or not there needs to be more thought given to the credit pricing structure with regard to LMI credits. And then the broader conversation, I think we've actually had it here today, but the broader conversation of really how are folks that are in that moderate income category served? For example, I think, again, we talked about it earlier, anybody that doesn't qualify for WAP, in the Clean Heat statute, you have the 60% AMI to 120 AMI is considered moderate, but of course the weatherization program serves 80 and below. So really we're talking about the 80% to 120% area median income population that how are they going to be served? It's a more straightforward answer when you're talking about the low income folks, because they can take advantage of weatherization. But then of course you're dealing with capacity issues on the workforce front. So all of these topics were brought up at the meeting. I think it was a really healthy discussion, and they're all well-founded. They're good questions. So I think those are some of the questions that kind of helped tee up the discussion for me, at least, in how to think about this and how we can look at the existing landscape of all these programs that are available and how we might be able to make them work for or unify them together to help the population. So that's it was an hour-long meeting, and we covered a lot of ground in it, but those are the topics we discussed broadly in that group. So I think the plan is to meet again and continue the conversation. So there's a lot to think about. I don't know if anybody has any reactions to that, but that was what was discussed.
Go ahead, Jen.
And that sounds like that was a great discussion. The one thing that came to mind when you said that maybe lower income people use less energy was the correlation to that they also carry a higher energy burden. So if we're looking at equity, the benefit to a low income family for having their energy burden reduced is also, I think, an important thing to look at as kind of a whole picture. And the other thing was keeping in mind that even when we say moderate income, given kind of the inflationary effects of the past year, even up to 120%, it's still a large, they can also carry a large energy burden that I think needs to be addressed.
Great points.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add, Ben, I'm sorry if I just missed this, but just to add that Ken and Rick from the TAG were there and participated pretty robustly in the discussion. I know there had been an interest for more TAG, direct collaboration, and we had identified the credit front loading issue as a potential one. So it was really helpful to have them listen in, and they had some, thoughts about what the marketplace might look like. I don't think we got a firm answer from them about sort of how soon they might provide information about what the marketplace looks like, so we could assess whether or not front loading the credits is plausible and at what levels. So that's going to be an ongoing thing where I think we're really going to have to press them to try to give us as much of a picture as they can, to sort of, one thing that was discussed is if we don't know sort of the cost of credits, we don't know how far up you could sort of increase those percentages or front load them. Like how much is the absolute limit, in order to figure out what we could possibly do. So I think I'm going to be, I talk to Rick, the tag chair, pretty frequently. So I'm going to encourage them to provide us information to help us make these decisions and make them grounded in reality. So, but it was really great. And I think they're hearing the sorts of questions that we're asking, and that will inform their discussion. So I'm not sure if they'll be able to attend our next one, but I will sort of extend the invitation and see if they're interested. And then the other thing that we had been charged with this group to come up with a new sort of agenda for the credit issues and sort of go through the remaining EAG work in the pacing document to figure out what else we were supposed to do. And that was not done. I think it was better that we did have this sort of robust, free-ranging discussion, but I'm hoping the next time we meet, we can do that the group asked for and come up with a list of things the credit issues group would like to tackle for the rest of our time. So sorry we didn't accomplish that, but I think it was a good discussion and laid some good groundwork. Happy to answer any questions about that.
Yeah, it was definitely a little hard to drill down to for more detail without that data that you were talking about, Mia, because I think, yeah, I do recall we were like, well, there's all these unanswered questions, but I think we did a really good job at kind of narrowing the scope of what we need to find out before we can go further. Yeah, so that was the meeting. And actually, I just wanted to respond to one thing that Jen just said. You were talking about kind of the energy burden and all the benefits that are sort of intangible, hard to quantify in terms of dollar amounts. When you weatherize someone's home, you get the health and safety benefits, there's psychological benefits as well. So, with regard to the different credit price for low, moderate, and market rate credit price, in meetings since last week, the idea of having some sort of societal cost test applied to the credit price has been raised. And I haven't had a ton of time to really think about that more thoroughly, but I just wanted to throw it out there because I think that is something that that's a good point. I think the price of the credit is, there's a monetary value there. However, we know there's all these other societal benefits that go along with, like, for example, serving a low-income family or household. So, maybe a societal cost test is applied to those credit price that could, give it value, which in turn, if you're increasing that societal value of that credit, maybe the price of that low-income credit could be decreased, thereby incentivizing obligated parties to, serve more low-income households. If you have a lower credit price per cost price, then it would be sort of a no-brainer to go after the low-income credits versus a market rate credit. So I know that there is that is used elsewhere in the efficiency space in Vermont, the societal cost test. So it's something that I'm going to be looking into, and I know here at the department we're thinking about it. So just throwing it out there to the group as a thought. So I think that's the update from the credit group.
Great. And as Mia said, there's still unfinished business, so you still have to go through and talk about just additional issues that the credit issues group can tackle. And so I guess I'm asking, would the group like to meet again next week or before the next EAG meeting? What kind of cadence are you all thinking?
I think that'd be a good idea. I don't know what other members are thinking, but there's a lot there. So I think if we meet again, we'd make more progress. So
Yeah, I'd echo that. I mean, I don't know about other members of the group, but I do want us to be really well prepared when the PUC does ask us for feedback on that, because I'm worried we're going to run into another tight time frame. No one's fault, but another tight time frame that we're not well equipped to have a full discussion with everyone participating in. So I don't think we need to meet every other week until that happens, but I would like to have a good pacing plan at least in place and understand where we're going. I think that would be helpful if this group is able to make that work.
Great. So I'm thinking this might be something that we need to make a motion for to have another meeting, or we could make a motion to continuously have these meetings until until we don't need them anymore. I'm not sure.
Yes, let me check.
I thought
What
we
the
had created a new group and we were supposed to come up with one, but I don't think we've needed motions to schedule subgroup meetings for the other one. So I would say no, but I'm certainly not the rules of order expert.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a little bit of a gray area based on what the motion says last time, the fact that it was updating an existing group rather than creating a new one. I don't see a problem with continuing to meet under the, I'll call it authorization or direction from last meeting. If there is something specific that the full group wants that subgroup to do, then it would be useful to make a motion to that end, but just to continue on the current direction shouldn't need more parliamentary procedure.
So are there any other specific questions that the EAG would like the credit issues group to tackle? I'm hearing they have enough on their plate already to try to figure out. Okay, great. So moving forward, or any other thoughts on the credit issues group? Great. So I'll move us forward. The next thing that we wanted to talk about were public education tools. You may have seen we shared around, Srini had some examples of updated language for a public explainer, just explaining the clean heat standard with different graphs and things like that. So we kind of wanted to bring it to the group. What types of other public engagement might we need to be able to, one, during this process of continuing to get public engagement as we're building out the report and building up to the finalization of the clean heat standard, but also what type of public education tools might they need coming out of the clean heat standard being enacted. So that's kind of the broad question. And we have, let's set expectations. We have about 15 minutes to talk about this. And also, what kind of structures might we need to have to make sure that we can keep working on engaging with the public and creating public education tools, or identifying what types of public education tools we might need. So I did a horrible job at explaining that, but if anybody wants to pick up on it, please feel free. Go ahead, Chris.
All right, sure. I don't know if this is what you were talking about. It was it came up in another conversation. We had a member of the public talk about how important it would be so that whoever owns the credit really understands what it is and what their options are. There was some, is that kind of in line with public education? Yeah, it just, we've already identified that a lot of low-income housing will require technical assistance to help them with that transition. So adding on this layer of, oh, now you have this credit that you can do things with. That's a complex topic that is even difficult for this group to kind of fully comprehend of how that would work. So just a really simple narrative of what your options are with your credit that you've received, and just really understanding the value of it. It just seems like an area ripe for fraud and abuse and ripping off vulnerable people. I'm not really 100% into the topic side, just some top of mind stuff.
Thanks.
Hopefully somebody can put me right.
Yeah, and I think that's a piece of it. I think it's also just the broader explanation of like what is the clean heat standard, and what does that mean for Vermonters, and kind of getting clear like with what are the facts around it. Mia, go ahead.
Yeah, so I see this based on our previous conversations with Dominic as two separate things. One, I think there will be a role for the credit issues group to discuss sort of marketplace issues and consumer protection that you know, the PUC is going to need to think about in order to create a fair marketplace. And I see that fitting in nicely if the group wants to tackle it with the credit issues group. There's this other group about sort of what information the PUC is providing and continues to provide to the public as part of its larger engagement process. And I think when, Dominic, correct me if I'm wrong, when Srini had sort of presented this material as something that the PUC could include in its basic explainer, there were some concerns that that whole like basic explainer had gotten sort of a little out of scope, but there was potentially a need for someone to advise or create materials or something to keep advising the public. So I don't know if you want to jump in. Like, I think it's the latter about what information about the clean heat standard and climate issues in general are coming out of this process. Is that correct, Dominic?
Yeah, that's accurate. I think the conversation we had a couple meetings ago about making sure that overview was accurate ballooned into something that, you know, got a little bit beyond an overview. The PUC is very much interested in identifying and producing documents, brochures, you know, whatever is needed to increase understanding. This also came in the context of public engagement is less effective if the public we are trying to engage is totally in the dark about what we're trying to talk about. We just recognize that within the PUC, we are quite low on resources to actually produce these things, and do not necessarily have the expertise inside the commission to make sure they are targeted to the people who need to know. And so we, you know, had the idea that if EAG agreed that this was a priority, maybe it was something that the EAG could assist us in identifying and creating.
Thanks, Dominic. Jeff?
Yeah, I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but I think along with what you've mentioned, you know, Vermonters are going to be hiring more contractors, and with that, there's going to be more people ripe for fraud, and people don't know how to hire contractors. So you get what you pay for, you know, getting multiple bids, making sure they're insured, get references, and not just the ones, you know what I'm talking about. It may not be specific to the clean heat standard details, but something needs to be provided to Vermonters so that they can get those measures installed themselves without being, you know, taken advantage of. So is that what you're looking for, or no?
That would absolutely be something that is on our mind, yes. Whether or not that specific resource is something that this group as a whole agrees is a priority is a question for the group itself. But I think that kind of out-of-the-box thinking is what we want, and especially in the context of the conversation we just had about serving Vermonters with low income. A lot of the policy solutions that address the issue holistically are beyond the direct scope of the clean heat standard. But just like the equity rubric that this group created, just like the public engagement best practices that this group created, there is one level of usefulness for the PUC itself, and there's an additional level of usefulness as, you know, contributions to this sectoral work.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Jen.
I guess I would point to Efficiency Vermont as either a model or maybe using what they have. They have in the program about the Rewiring America. I think it was someone named Matthew or Matt from Efficiency Vermont? Can't remember his last name, but he was excellent. And he also pointed out that they had one-page information about heat pumps and climate change, and they also have they have contractors that are part of an efficiency group. So again, you wouldn't necessarily have to use the materials at Efficiency Vermont, but I think they have built out a way to help people understand certain topics that will come up under the clean heat standard, whether it's understanding how a heat pump works, or again, who are the contractors that have the expertise in these areas. So some type of I think they could provide a lot of information on how we might go about this. And I think it's also important to note that, you know, it's not just low-income homeowners or moderate income homeowner. Every homeowner needs help in this landscape. It's all very new. Heat pumps are new to a lot of people. Hot water heat pumps are new. Solar is new, and everybody comes to it. Some people come to it with knowledge about their homes, and some people are very new to it and need to have the assistance of contractors. So I think the education component and the consumer advocacy is really important and should take some of our time and attention.
Thanks, Jen. So there was an ask floated around about, you know, continuing to have these conversations of maybe what Jen's pointing to of, okay, where can the public go to use some of the resources that are already out there? And then what Dominic was pointing to of what additional resources might need to be developed to be able to fill the gaps where there might not already be some. And so the idea was to potentially have the public engagement group that we've had before transition in a similar way to the credit issues group, and kind of think through some of these like where do we have the gaps, where do we already have the resources, and potentially develop resources where they might be needed. Is that something that this group is interested in doing and picking up, or is there another way that we would want to go about it?
Ashira, are you asking the breakout group or the whole equity advisory group?
I'm asking the whole equity advisory group, with obviously some priority to the people who would actually be doing the work. So the breakout group itself. Go ahead.
I'm coming in late to the conversation, so apologies for that. So I'm assuming, yeah, like you just said, that this group might transition to the public engagement tools and gaps and existing resources that exist. If the equity advisory group agrees that having a discussion around that might be necessary, I'd be happy to bring in some experts from Efficiency Vermont that work on those tools and resources to share out. So just wanted to share that.
I think that'd be great. That's, if you have experts that do that, then we should probably hear from them, right? Would that be, I think that would be beneficial to the group.
And by the group, do you mean the EAG as a whole, or the morphed proposed?
Yeah. I suppose it's probably most appropriate in the subgroup, which I'm not a member of, but I think it's it's filling the void here. Speaking broadly, I think yeah, if there's experts out there in that space that can inform our decisions, I think that would be beneficial. I'm certainly not an expert in public engagement, so I don't know if others feel the same way.
I think I was part of that group with Emily and Chris
I think it was John.
and
Yeah, John Mandeville.
and John. That's right. Yeah. I'd be willing to meet and work on that if we wanted to do something at a subgroup level. And I'd love to hear from the experts at Efficiency Vermont too. I think that'd be really, really helpful.
To Dominic or Ashira, it would be helpful, since I missed the relevant piece of this, to why the group is meeting, if notes could be shared, or just for that segment of context, possible.
I think you were actually here for the majority. We've only been talking
Okay.
about it for like the past 10 minutes. So it hasn't been an extensive conversation. I guess, so then if this group were to meet again, are there any specific questions that anyone from the broader EAG would like them to explore? Go ahead, Mia.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile, but it should be pretty narrowly scoped in terms of, there's a lot of information people will need to make a climate transition over the long term. But I do think it should be, kind of, where do we see gaps in the PUC process? What information is coming out of this process to guide people? I mean, I don't think there's no need or no room for suggesting other things like what specific household resources we'll need. But I do think it should be tied to this process and where we see this group adding value into advising the PUC about, what should come out of this process. I think that's still pretty vague, but I think we should focus on, instead of tackling the huge knowledge gaps we know exist, tackling, what could come out of this process to make it more equitable and have the public better informed than we currently have.
Anyone else?
I agree with what Mia just said. Yeah, I think that'd be great. Get a little more context. And it sounds like from Dominic, what you said, basically, you guys are looking to the EAG for just guidance on those last 3 meetings and how to allocate resources in the best way possible, is what it sounds like.
Yes, I think that's definitely part of it. I'll just summarize from my perspective. I think the conversation has been swirling around these points. There is a knowledge gap both in the general public and in the semi-interested public of where we are to where we need to go, and the relevant information of how to get there. The PUC recognizes that gap exists, but does not feel currently capable to inventory what is needed to fill that, nor begin to produce those products. If the EAG agrees that it is a worthwhile use of time to inventory those gaps and begin to produce products, one way to act on that would be to have a subgroup on that topic. Given that everybody in this call is already quite busy, instead of adding something new, we identified the public engagement subgroup of already having produced its main document, and therefore could be appropriate for transformation into something that takes on this scope as well. If people are interested in doing that, I do have a motion ready.
Emily?
I'm so sorry. don't think I'm fully connecting the public education tool of like existing incentives and programs to like what Dominic just said around, I guess, Dominic, could you clarify where you said like there's a knowledge gap in the general public and interested parties about where we are and where we need to go? Do you mean like meeting the Global Warming
Yeah.
Solution Acts, or?
I think this part of the context you did miss, Emily, and it is particularly relevant, is when the PUC produced the CHS overview, there was some feedback on what was in it. PUC made some changes. We received additional suggestions, especially from Srini. We did not want to put those into that document because it would begin to overwhelm that document. So what are other documents that we need to produce to supplement our overview to make sure that those engaging in this process and those engaging with CHS as a whole are working from accessible common information?
Okay.
So I
Thank
think Chris raised it, like basically further I guess clarity and information on how the mechanics of the credit market will work, I think is what Chris is getting at, is like basically one of those issues within that one initial document that could provide further clarity, because I think I would echo Chris's point that, you know, I've been asked by friends and family and whatever, like how the credit system will work, and I explain it to them, and then, you know, there's follow-up questions, etc. But just having that baseline document that covers the basics, you know, in a comprehensive yet succinct way would be super helpful. And then the next thing on my mind is like how do you get that in front of the people that need to see it? And I think in many ways, maybe the public engagement folks from Efficiency Vermont would have, you know, be able to shed some light on this. But you know, there's a lot of, for example, the low income population, there's a good number of them that don't regularly have access to or utilize the internet, for example. You know, maybe it's a flyer or, you know, meetings held like at, for example, Tri Park in Brattleboro. So yeah, I don't know if that's directly kind of what we're talking about right now, but those are just some things on top of my head that to round out this conversation. But
Thanks, Ben. Yeah. Emily, your hand is still up. I don't know if you had something new to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, just two really quick things to share. One is that, yeah, happy to pull in folks that have worked on the Rewiring America EVT tool. That sounds like that is like a little bit separate than what Dominic's needs are coming out of that conversation with Chris, but happy to do that in that group. And then also just noting that some of the strategies that Efficiency Vermont uses from our outreach and engagement experts, there was like a little bit of mismatch of the timeline of the clean heat standard and a lot of the things that we had to share that just frankly weren't helpful to this process, because they're very much need a lot of time, and like Ben just said, a lot of it is showing up in public places versus doing email lists and contact in the way that I think makes sense for the clean heat standard. So just with the tight timeline. So I just wanted to share that. And then the last thing is that I'm going to be away for the next week and a half. So Ashira and Mia know who to contact. Haley Rowe will be participating in the next meeting, but in terms of scheduling that meeting, I won't be there, and you'll have to work through her. So that timing of bringing in EVT experts, I think there just might be a little bit of a mismatch in terms of our participation in that.
Emily, Chris, and then Jen.
It would so it would be nice if there was some material that was developed of how does this impact me, just from the different viewpoints of who is this a landlord, is this a renter, is this somebody who's in a multifamily versus, there's just different levels of stakeholders. And whenever I try to engage somebody, it's always like, well, how does this impact me? And to get to that level is requires some a lot of reading. Sorry, I'm just trying to process that a little bit more. It's hard to extract engagement with somebody if they don't know specifically how it's going to impact them in their scenario. Maybe even some examples, just some scenarios to play through that somebody could relate to. Here's how this was, this would impact you. Your options are this, and this is what the intended outcome is. It's such a high level meaty topic. It's hard to digest impact.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Jen?
Oops.
Yeah, to what you were saying, Chris, I think people are really hungry for information about clean energy. So while we, it's good to have conversations about how the clean energy credits will work, there's still large gaps in people that come to me and talk to me just in general about things like, what does this clean energy transition mean? So I think anytime we can bring any information about the whole topic, that's important. The second point is, I don't think there's a hurry, so we could definitely wait till you get back, Emily, because I think part of it is the current public engagement, but I think we're also talking about what public engagement and consumer advocacy are we going to embed in the clean heat standard as it goes forward. So, and that I think is an ongoing topic that we can really learn from, again, how some of the outreach has been done in Efficiency Vermont. I'm surprised every time I go to one of these meetings how small the group is of people that come to the same webinars. Because most people don't have time or they don't have the inclination. But in general, what I find, I went to our company retreat and I had several people talking to me about the incentives for electric cars, because it's just not generally well accessible. So I think anything we can do to embed that kind of accessibility into the program going forward on a number of topics around, this transition will be really beneficial.
Thanks, Jen. Mia, and then we'll have to start wrapping up.
Yeah, kind of in that vein. So I am hearing that there's, I think, broad agreement that there are sort of information resources that would be beneficial. So I guess I'd propose that the public engagement group meet again. I still think this fits under their public engagement umbrella without reconstituting the group. Meet again, maybe do what the credit issues group isn't coming in with sort of a reasonable sort of work plan. I think this group is really going to have to be careful to not let this mushroom, because we know that the needs are so great. I think we should focus on sort of what's achievable for this group without huge amounts of work on our own, considering our other responsibilities. And then maybe, like the credit issues group is doing, it might have to not be the next meeting, but the meeting after, but come back to the group and report on kind of what you think the scope of that group's job should be going forward, and things that the group should tackle. Does that seem like something that the group would be supportive about? There seems to be a larger conversation here.
Go ahead, Emily.
I support that, but I also really welcome from the rest of the equity advisor group what the work plan should be. I think that I'm a little confused about, and that may just be me, about overall what the, sorry, go ahead, Mia.
Yeah, I don't think you're confused. I think that this isn't, I think the PUC's request was kind of vaguely scoped, which is fine. I think our needs that we've identified is very broad. I think it would be helpful for the public engagement group to figure out what sort of is achievable and most needed from this group to tie into the process. And not just what people need from the public, but what could reasonably be produced and where you could make the most impact as part of this process. So just like the credit issues group is doing, creating a new direction for this group for the remainder of our time, I think is the best way to solve this. It's not just you. I think you doesn't have a clear idea for what should be done. So that's why I'm pushing it back to this group.
Ben?
So on the topic of clarity,
to what we're talking about here. So maybe this is a question for you, Dominic. Are we looking for, is the PUC looking for like recommendations from us for like the next 3 public engagement meetings? Like, you know, so within a couple weeks, are we talking about public engagement strategy to embed in the larger, you know, final report? So public engagement for the clean heat standard broadly moving forward. I'm not on the public engagement group, but like the latter. So we're talking about final work product here. Or
Part of the answer to the part of the reason we brought this up is we don't know what's needed. We hope that this group
Okay.
might have a better idea of what's needed. If this group also doesn't know what's needed, maybe we take one whole big step backwards and say, you know, what's going in. There is a part for the upcoming public engagement meetings. It is more informative to have knowledgeable people participate. But if that's not what is actually going to be successful in the context of this program, let's set our sights on that further thing and say, hey, legislature, if we do this, here's this giant list of information we need to create.
okay, cool. Yeah. So maybe that could be, I'm not, again, not on that subgroup, but maybe that's what could be unpacked in that subgroup and decide like where we can be most useful as an EAG. That's how I'm thinking of it. I'm just kind of being broad and open in the discussion here so that we can all kind of make sure we're on the same page, because although I'm not on the subgroup, I just also wanted some understanding on it, but also happy to join the subgroup too, if, you know,
Thanks.
if more help's needed.
So yeah, so what I'm hearing is that we should have a meeting. Hopefully maybe once Emily returns, and just a meeting that kind of scopes out what products are needed, and are they things like, what can this subgroup continue to do? Are we looking specifically at things related to the final report? Are we looking at materials that can be produced along the way to help the PUC? Are we looking at just kind of a scoping meeting? I also see that Jeff put in the chat, and I'll just read it as it is. I believe this is administrative. I'd be happy to jump from the credits group to the public engagement group. It's more up my alley if that is helpful. And just a reminder, you can be on both groups, and also happy to have more help on this group as well. So what I will do, because since this is also just a continuation of an existing group, I'll go ahead and reach out and start scheduling with the original members, as well as Ben and Jeff, to try to get another time to go ahead and meet. Great. So then quickly, we will go ahead and open up for one last round of public comment. If there's anyone who has a public comment that they'd like to make. Not hearing any. So then I'll go ahead
No.
and.
Yes, I'm John
Go ahead.
McCormick.
Hi,
I'm
John.
sorry, it's a little difficult getting on.
No worries.
Yes, I hear that there may be different credit costs. Now, my fuel dealer has about 25,000 customers, and some of the smaller have just a mom and pop operation. If we're talking about different, different increased fuel costs to individuals, and not to the entire customership of Champlain Valley Fuel, it's going to be impossible. It's going to be impossible to even find who is eligible based upon what? An investigation of what? Their last tax return? So you've created an upside down pyramid here. And you know, I just cannot believe that you'll find equity in exempting one person but not another. Another point, and this is probably where it really starts to come together. November 5 is the due date for CHS. And I think the public education is going to be about, this is going to hurt you. And what could save you to vote another Republican into the Senate. And you're going to have to live with that. Okay, you're creating something that definitely will demand that the governor will veto this, and hope to God it is sustained. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other public comments? Any responses? Okay. With that, I'll go ahead and move us on to our next steps. So our next steps are Jeff will email the annual weatherization report to Assure to share with the group. We will, we will talk about the, we will create another agenda item to talk about the tensions between the objectives of the law to lower emissions overall and adding low-income households to make the transition. The credit issues group will meet again under the direction of the last meeting, and Assure will schedule. The public engagement group will meet again to make a work plan, figuring out what the scope of that subgroup will be moving forward. And Jeff and Ben are interested in joining. Is there anything that I missed? Okay,
I
and
don't
with
think
that,
so. As a leadership group, we'll discuss sort of how to give more time, so more structure for our final report assignments going forward. In the meantime, I think if you have gotten an indication of who to connect with, that would be fine to keep working on individually. I don't think that work will, I think that work has value, but hopefully we'll come up with more structure going forward about how to tackle that report during our next meeting. So to be determined.
thanks, Mia.
Thanks.
And with that, I'll hand it back over to you to close us out.
Okay, any last issues, questions? Okay, hearing none, I am going to call this meeting to a close. Great work, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you all.
Take
Thanks.
care.
Thanks.
Bye.